Video considers the problem we have on raising project-related expenses when we don't see anything in the expenses field. That's the issue we've got. So let me start by navigating and showing the issue. Just turn the volume up. Okay, so if we go to the home page, we go to me, and then from me we go to expenses because I want to enter an expense that I've incurred. So using standard functionality and the standard process, click on create expense report, and from clicking expense report I want to create a new item, and on creating the item it's got today's date and the type would be, let's say, 24-hour meal rate or accommodation with family and friends. Choose that one for example, and let that load up the remainder of the screen. And what we can see is project related over here. Let me just fill in a couple of details for completion. So we'll say amount and we'll put it in GBP. For some reason we'll put in, say, 25. Description, it's got an asterisk, so we need to put in something for description. Just put in test one. Add in a receipt, put in a link. Link to be complete. Okay, so we're building up the expense report. That's fine. And now interested in either adding in the project number here, or we can go to the bottom and add an itemization type at the bottom. So if I put in meal rate, and again I'll put in for subsistence. So the account has defaulted in from the default expense account of the user, and what we want to see is whether the project number can default in as well. Can I see a project number? And I noticed that the asterisk is not there for project number, and maybe because it's the type that might have been chosen. So if I chose conference hotels, for example, that's not project related. If I chose air travel, I can see that's not project related. If I went for 24-hour meal rate, I can see that's not also required to be project related. So if I click on the drop down rate here and go 24 meal rate here rather than accommodation with family, changing the expense type. Okay, so I need to put in a 25 just to keep that error happy. What I can now see is project number is required for this particular expense type from the expense template. Would have been defined like that. And what I'm really interested in knowing is, can I see the project number? And when I search on it, if I go to advanced, if I put is not blank and is not blank and do a search, I don't see any return of projects. So how do we resolve this is the issue. And there are many things to check. Maybe first thing to check would be on the expense template itself. So if I right click and duplicate and add another tab in and go to setup and maintenance, and from there go to search and search on expense templates. I can see it here. So let's go into Manage Expense Template, and there's a main one set up here, IMP Expense Report Template, and it's the default template. So when you create an expense, this is the one that's defaulting up, and you can see all the different choices here of different types of expense items when we create the expense itself. So when we go into the template, this is the list of all the available expense types we can see at the top there. So the first thing to notice was itemization behavior. We can just see the top three are enabled. So 24 meal rate, accommodation, family and friends, and air travel. So when we go to create an expense, based on the 24-hour meal rate type, when we go into type, the list of values available to us is limited. So for example, if I went for book purchase, I'm not getting the return that I want. If I went for 24-hour meal rate, I am getting a return with accommodation with family and friends, which is based on here, for example, if I go into 24-hour meal rate, and we can see that it's enabled to a point, but if I go into 24 meal rate, at the very top, accommodation with family and friends, there's the only one that's included. It wasn't included previously. I clicked to add it on just to enable an expense to even be created in the first place. And if I also checked air travel or awards and prizes and bank charges and save those, and we can see that the itemization is enabled rather than disabled. That's one thing. That enables the list of the values to be available for selection. That's one thing. The next thing would be itemization needs to be enabled, and if we do save and close, we can see here it is enabled, so that allows it to be available in the drop down value. Now the next thing we want to think about is within the expense types, are there project expenditure? Is there project expenditure type mapping? And there wasn't originally, but there is now because we've added the value. So we can see a default. So two things to do. One is to check enable projects. That was unticked, now it's ticked. And then also you do need to add in a default project expenditure type. So we went for accommodation and subsistence on 1300, which also populates the analysis code on the top right, and also make sure that the effective start date is also starting from today or from before today as well. It's optional to put in the line down below, put in there for completion. So from a project template perspective, this looks decent. So, it looks like there are values there. So there shouldn't be a reason as to why project numbers unavailable when we go to select a particular project. But we've seen when we go to advanced, and I have an example project here, PPM at the bottom. So if I go starts with any, and I go search, doesn't return our project. And then remaining beginning with PM, and if I just did PM percentage again, doesn't bring our project. So there's a fair few things that need to be considered. Other than from an expenses point of view, an expenses template point of view, as to why it's not showing up for projects when we want to associate a project to our expense template. If I do save and close, and if we were to create a new template, for example, so I'll just do this exercise to show its completion. So if I go UT2, and I'll just call that UT2, and we've got one singular business unit, so we don't have issues with many business units. And in fact, we'll look at the business unit in a moment. But if I wanted to then have an expense type associated, and I called it subsistence, for example. Again, and then I might call it subsistence. Yeah, miscellaneous is fine. And if we then had to think about an analysis code to then map that to for subsistence, then search yeah, choose it for accommodation and subsistence. That's fine in the 1300s. Let me just save that for a moment. And what we're after here is project expenditure type mapping, and what we want to do is enable this for projects. And our default expenditure type would be in the 1300s, and click OK to that. So it's enabled. We want to default it, and just do a save and close. Let the description be required in the expense fields when we create the expense report, and then just save and close. And I will come back to this in a moment. So this is a UT2. So in UT2, come down to the bottom, expense types, and subsistence has come down. And I notice it's got an itemization behavior disabled. So that's something to think about. So click in subsistence, and we've got the project expenditure type mapping. That's fine for enable projects. Requiring receipts, I don't know if we really want to go that far. We could go into project unit, and we could say for that project unit, and I want the accommodation and subsistence expenditure type, and save and close, and just come back and edit this for a moment. And what I'm interested in is in itemization, and that seems fine. Let me just save and close that. Save and close that. And then I'm going to come out and come back in. And I'll say, just take it, done. Come back into manage export templates, manage report templates. Sorry, click on this UT2, and click on subsistence itself, and just having a look, category miscellaneous, that's fine. We did choose accommodation and subsistence, so just for completion I might just put category accommodation, and I might give the description the same value as name as well, and just close that. And that's fine. I've got name and I've got description. Just clicking in the line for a moment, clicking on edit, and we could have another line as well. And what that has done is opened up this itemization from being disabled. Now I can finally, what I want to do is enable it. That was the issue I was seeing, and also want to include this as well. So now save and close analysis. And I'll call this, I'm just going to get sub for the moment. And one. Yep, happy with that. Okay, close. Yep, good. Right. So what the sub enabled and subsistence. Let me enable that. All right, that's good. Right. So I've got two. And they are just we'll now call this student. Otherwise, we've got two of the same. A bit tricky in the expenses sometimes. You have to be a bit careful. Okay, you've got student accommodation for both. Well, for the bottom one and subsistence for the top, both project related and both enabled. Enabled projects, accommodation subsistence, project related. Fine, good. With analysis code, good. And move over to student accommodation and enable projects, default expenditure type. Yeah, good, fine. Two in there. Both enabled. So we've got a report template available for use for projects. So what does that mean? It means from an expenses point of view, that's fine, that's good. Now if I go back to creating an expense claim, let's go create another just to get a fresh one and fresh values. Where we go template, let's go to the template we just created, which is the CUT2. And then from there we put, let's say, subsistence and good. We can see it's project related. And if we want to put an amount in of say 55 and just put in test one and complete and then attachment, so that part's done. Save and close. Okay, now this is the sort of moment of truth. There's like, will this be project related or not? I should be able to see projects, made it project related, why not? So now we search for our projects and just take that value again. And come back copy. Oh, that's not the value of the project, maybe okay. Right, that is the project name. Search, no, does not show. If I just do a smaller search, no. Wildcard at the end, no. So that we're still in our problem. So even whether I select it here or if I go by expense type, student accommodation that way, and bring it down and 55, no remaining balance, that's all good. If I now look for project number and go for search and put in the project number, no, it's not bringing back my project number. So there are various checks to think about, and one of them was when we thought about business unit earlier. So let's just think about that for a sec. So if we went to business unit, just leaving some tabs on it. Okay. So if we said, okay, setup and maintenance, and I want to check that the business unit set assignment is actually there. If I go to manage implementation projects and go to an implementation project I've created and go to business unit. Now I want to search for the business unit set assignments. And if I want to do that, financials, then we'll have a look at manage unit business assignment. That's good. Set tasks coming up here. So there's a few areas. One would be, let's go to the function actually first. Let's just select the scope. Select the Imperial Business Unit. And there's the Imperial Business Unit, and then scroll down to save and close. Yep, that is the one that I want. And from the business unit functions, we can see expense management, and it's checked. So we've got it for the business unit functions. Let me just cancel that. So I don't take an issue there. If we say, okay, what about for business unit assignment? And so it's a bit of a lower level granularity. Receivables, sales method, sales revenue. Is there anything specifically from an expenses point of view? Might be something to think about. Yeah, makes me wonder. So I'll read of this for a moment. Claim reasons, contracts, credit allocations, decision level departments, dunning plans, grades, landed costs, lead note, opportunity, pricing rules, receivables, sales method. Yeah, I wonder if there's that assignment. So let me just cancel that for a second. That was a wonder. There's data access for users. So I'm in as a particular user, and we see our user. I'll just log out of this screen and come back to the home page. There's this particular user. So do we have the roles to be able to look at expenses, create expenses properly? So we go to Tools, Security Console. I'm interested in our user here. So if I go to first name, and what I'm interested in knowing is, do we have the right expenses roles, expenses manager, etc. So just come down. Yeah, we do. We do have expenses manager, even expenses auditor. So we're kind of good from that perspective. But in a lower level of detail, it's one thing to say I've got the roles. Another thing is to say, do you have the data access for these roles, which is also a consideration. So let's look at that then. So expense auditor, expense manager, do we have the data access? Let's go settlement maintenance. And then from settlement maintenance, let's go search and then go manage data access for the task. And then manage data access for users. And then you click on the very top, go to all users with data access, and then you put your username here, which maybe I should have copied to make my name easier. Okay, that is the user. It's fine. Click search, and let's have a look at the data access. So we see roles, we want expenses. Let's see if we've got data access for expenses. Yes, expense manager and expense auditor have been given on top of this the security context at business unit level for the IMP BU. business unit. So that was the business unit we saw a bit earlier. So we're associated to that business unit and being allowed to deal with expenses for that business unit. So we don't have a business unit issue for set assignments, or the business unit was configured for allowable for expenses. We saw that. We saw our user who's trying to create this expense report. You can see they've got the right data access to do that. In creating the expense report, we looked at the expense template. From the expense template, we actually created a new template and we added a accommodation and subsistence expense types, which were project enabled and associated to expenditure types. So maybe we should have a look at those expenditure types in the system to see these project related expenditure types. Do they allow expenses to be applied against them? So if we go to setup and maintenance, and from setup and maintenance, we can go and have a search on the expenditure types. So if we go manage expenditure types here, and hours were 133, for example, for accommodation and subsistence. So if I just bring that back here. Right. And so this expenditure type, accommodation and subsistence, is defined to be allowable against expense reports. So it wasn't an issue. So this is not a problem. So that is not an issue either. And when we get highly stuck, we can go to our friend ChatGPT, and there are a few places you can go. You go to ChatGPT or Oracle Community, or just Google errors or problems that you've got and see if you can get Oracle SRs returned back to you. If you go to ChatGPT and write your problem, so it's like Oracle expenses, creating an expense report, I can't see any list of values for projects. Why is this? Let's see what we get for a return. And expense is not project related. Well, it is, because we saw over here manage expenditure types, and this expenditure type is allowable for expense reports. Fine. Project not assigned to you, based on employee or business unit or organization or security. Right, security rules, I don't think that's an issue because we have the data access. Business unit, with the data access, there was business unit association to that, and also at a business unit level, it was configured for the offerings for expenses, and the Imperial was allowed by the BU units, so based on employees. So we'd seen all the data access, but this is really saying projects are not assigned to you, but our project is. And so if I take the project number again, which is here, and if I navigate over to the projects module for a second, so I'll move over from expense reports and go over to projects, and within projects I go to project financial management, and it's actually here from a previous search, so let's take it. And what I'm interested in the overview here is team members. The person that's trying to create this expense report is a team member for the project, so there is association from this user being a team member. And while I'm saying that, let me move over to HCM for a second, just to have a look at the individual themselves. So what I mean by that is I want to make sure this is an active user. So just go into person records and search for a user. Okay, this user login is not going to allow me to do that. So let me just open up in private window and log in with somebody with a higher amount of authority to be able to search on users, which I'm about to do. So let's go to the home page and just log out of this user and go in with a single sign-on to another user, a high level of privilege. Okay, there's another user with a high level of privilege. Let me go to my client groups, go to person management, and now be able to search on this person. And what am I interested in knowing is I want to know if they're active and they're on the system. Just do a couple of like sanity checks. So yeah, okay, effective start date. Right, so they are currently active, I can see. They're an employee on the system. Then you assignment, fine, active payrolls, primary. Okay. Seems fine, other than maybe there's no FTE association, but that's should still allow you to create project related expenses anyway. So the employee looks like they're set up on the system, and on the bottom we can see the default expense account. So that's what was applied when creating the expense report. This is what would default in as the GL account. There is another place that would have an expectation of an expense account also to be created against the person. So if I try and look for that, I think it's person type. I think this way. Person type, manage. I forget, but that was maybe a moot point. I'm just trying to find the same thing in two different places. We saw the default expense against that person anyway. So what that means is when we wanted to create the expense report, and let me log out of this person for a moment, go to the second one. So just need to go into our Dev6 environment and log in this way rather than SSO. Yeah, so we're looking at the expenditure type. So when we're going into expenses, it's the default that we see when we're creating an expense. So create items, and when we're creating this expense report, the value that I'm discussing is over here. It's this account So that's the default expense account against the HCM record that defaults here. That's what came against the person. So that's what's defaulting there correctly. That's fine. We're trying to establish why we don't see anything from project number. We looked at a lot of issues so far, but there are still other items to think about as well. So if I come back to kind of a list here, the project is inactive or not chargeable. This project is active and it is chargeable. And we've looked previously at the project to know that. So if I move from here and go back to the projects module for a second. So we're trying to understand more about the nature of our project. Just go back into the Dev6 environment. That seemed to be a bit sticky and wasn't taking me anywhere. So let's go to the home page. Let's go over to projects. Then projects, project financial management. This is the project we're looking at. You can see it's active here. So status is active. Tells us over here it's active. You can see a start date and an end date. So the end date is May 27. So creating our expense report today, which is the 4th of June, falls well within this. So that's fine. So we don't have a date issue. We don't have a project not being active issue. We're fine in these respects. We also can see that we're a team member correctly as well. There's a budget consideration, but it's not the end of the world, that's fine. So, and from a financials tab point of view on the project overview, we can see also a couple of more details to give us confidence that the project is good. Let's look a bit further down on the financials tab when that decides to open. Yeah, so the basic information looks good from the header of the project. Don't take issue with that. Not sure why it's taking so long to open to the financials tab. Let me just duplicate this for a second. Just give us more details on the financial nature of this project. I'm just going to bring this back over to ChatGPT. So yeah, they're active, we can see. So that will allow expense charging. It's not closed, it wasn't completed. It is chargeable. Some configurations only populate project LOV after certain fields are entered. Well, with business unit cost center expenditure org or expense date. So this is really a little bit going back to on the creation of the expense report, having that information there, which we did. So we weren't missing anything. So if we go back to create report and create item, we'll take either template, take the report template here, for example. I know it's good. Yeah, so we could say, okay, I've taken expense type, the date being the 4th within the dates of the project now, as we've seen. I put an amount here of say 50. Stick in values for test, put in 50 here, so there are no remaining balance. Yeah, no remaining balance. Test we can put here as well. What we're interested in knowing is when I've selected the project, I want to bring up the associated task and all the other details. Account we know is coming up from the default expense account against the HCM record. But the issue again is the visibility of the project number. So come to advanced again and put is not null or is not blank. Is not blank, match any of these two conditions and search. Project is not returning, and trying really to understand why is that. So again, we're talking about business units. Some configure business unit was fine. Cost center, expenditure or expense date, these are all fine. Project data isn't being synchronized properly. Come back to that in a sec. Your Oracle role may not be included. Well, we are. We saw it from an expenses point of view. Our roles also has projects associated to it because we saw us going into the projects module itself and querying on projects. So, and we saw the expenses themselves as well. If I go, I mean, I can double check that for completion. So if I go into the Dev6 environment and look for our user from a project's perspective and data access perspective for the project's roles. So go back to security console and if I go to users and if I go to first name and search from a project perspective, and maybe I should have done this in one go in the beginning, but we were focusing on expenses as we were. So I can see, project accountant, project administrator, project application administrator, project billing expert, all the roles are here. And the second check would be, well, do you have the data access for those roles as well? So let's set up a maintenance search, manage data access for users, and we'll search, and we're bringing a lot back. So if I go for projects, yeah, we can see project administrator, executive accountant, manager, billings. We've got the security context, and we've got the security context value. We've got the business unit association. So there's not an issue whether it's projects or whether it's for expenses for our user. We've got the data access and the roles. This proves it. So when we come back to the point that we're making here, don't take an issue with that. There's the other users be able to see it, error message when there's no error message. There's just no value. I'm interested in this one, project integration, setup issue. So I'll say, please, can you explain the following? And it's kind of taking us back a bit. We've seen that it's active and I know it's chargeable and the relevant tasks are chargeable and transaction controls don't prevent expense entry. Well, the only way to sort of prove that is to look at this at a task level. So if we move over to projects and if I go to awards, for example, to see the budget and the task. So if I go to grants management, go to manage awards, and if I then type in the value for the award that I'm looking for, so it's that project number, AA would be the award. So let's search on that. Yeah, this is our award. So let's go into the award now. And this was our project that we were looking at, which is associated to the award at the top. So if you have a look at the budget for this award, that will show us from a task perspective what we've got. So go to task 1.0 and see staff, for example. Well, it's more on the travel and subsistence. And I have previously added here travel and accommodation and subsistence and the 1300 here. So it's, from a task point of view, we do have a chargeable resource with revenue associated against it, budget against it as well. So we've got the project, we've got an expenditure type, we've got an allowable budget against it. This it's I think there's some additional budget that can be used. It's not all used up. That's all that's referring to is that little arrow there. But that so look, I mean, it kind of seems fine. We've got a baseline, we've got a current working budget. So transaction controls don't prevent expense entry. I don't think we do have any. It's a current version, current working budget. So if I do view columns, might be easy just to show all. So if I just scroll right a bit, we've got some DFFs, but I don't think that's not for our consideration here. Revenue. So this project was off the back of a project template, and the project template will have its definitions of transaction controls, which either can stop or allow certain expenditure types to be applied against a budget when creating transactions, either from within the projects module or subledgers. If we wanted to see that, we could quickly go into, again, the Dev6 environment and have a look, and we would just need to go into the project template itself. So setup and maintenance, we can find a project template. So have a look at the project templates, and this is a UKRI project template, and they all begin with a letter T. So we want the here this one, T Research UKRI. So let's have a look at this particular one, and if we want to have a look at the transaction controls, and I can see over here if I want to see the transaction controls, I can just click on edit and it will give me a view. And there are two types of transaction controls, inclusive and exclusive, where we're defining either exclusive. So for inclusive, I'll just do one at a time. Inclusive controls, it says select the expenditure types that are chargeable. And then for exclusive, these are ones that aren't chargeable. So if I go to exclusive, it's like everything in this list is not chargeable to that task. And inclusive is add everything. Well, there's no values for inclusive or exclusive, so there are actually no transaction controls. So pretty much anything can get through. So that's not an issue. So when we have the view of transaction controls don't prevent, well, no, they don't. There's nothing preventing expense entry here. I can put creating these expenses, our expenditure types that we're seeing over here. Any of them can go through because then nothing's being stopped by transaction controls. That's not an issue. Project security, restricting visibility. No. Oracle uses project security. No, that's not a business unit mismatch. We've only got one business unit we're using. We're not in that organization or that type of industry. We're using many business units. Expenditure org setup, expenses are transferred to project expenditure items. If employees expenditure org or HR assignment is not configured, Oracle may maybe unable to derive project counting information, therefore suppresses project selections. So the expenditure org, so that's going to be the department that's associated to our particular user. So our department, I was going to come back to 4 in a second. My eye went here. I'll come back to 4. Yeah, we need both project and task, but we don't see either. And we've got valid tasks, so it's not, but we just don't see our project or tasks. Data access, we've kind of been through a couple of times, and that's fine. Configuration of expense templates, projects are mandatory, and we put it in, and we clicked enable for projects, and we put an expense type. Fine. Project setting for certain expense types. Don't know why. Now, this used to work in the previous environment, so I don't know why it doesn't work now, and it's the same configuration as we had before. So it's not that. We don't have any restricted policies as well. Okay, we're just looking at 4 for a second. Expenses are often transferred to projects as expenditure items. If the employer's expenditure org is not configured correctly, Oracle may be unable to derive the project counting information and therefore suppress project selections. Well, I think there's nothing wrong with our department for our particular user. So, and I may not be able to see that user here. So I'm going into our other user. This screen finally opened up. Just wanted to say on the financial side, so you can see the financial performance on the bottom. You can see associated contract with this project, customer name, supplier. Okay, don't really take much issue. We were looking at number 4. If an employee's expenditure or HR assignment is not configured correctly, yeah. So from an HCM perspective, that's just saying the department associated against this user as a setup as an employee. So if I went into, if I logged out of this user, and all I'm going to do is log in to a user with more authority and to be able to see records in more detail, then I'll do that. And all I'm wanting to see is the associated department to see if that looks reasonable against the employee that's been set up from the HCM record. So if we look at our user, and I'm looking at the department association, which is SPC, Transformation Great Service. So I don't think there's, I mean, the only way to really think about that is then have a look at the department in maybe a bit more detail just to get an idea and have some confidence around the department setup. So if we then go to search, manage departments, and then in departments, see if we can search on this particular department. And just opening this department now. And Yeah, it's got a good effective date. Not included for work-life cost. That's another issue, but that's, yeah, department's active. It's in place. Looks good. You can go to the HTM department org tree and see that it's there as well. That'll probably be another step, but that might be too detailed here. But I think there's good confidence that the department is fine also. But the employee department looked good. So I'd say in conclusion, where we are is we're unaware as to why we can't create project related expense reports. There is some thought maybe the latest release of Oracle may have had a bug that's being developed, and we'll hear something from Oracle soon. But this is now currently under investigation as to why can we not create project-related expenses. So that's the sort of question that needs to be answered. We can create expenses that aren't project-related, but for project-related ones, we don't see projects appearing in the list of values, and we don't understand why. We've done the checks on the user roles, data access. We've done it on expenses, templates, project association with expenditure types, project related expenditure types that are allowable for expenses, and from the projects module itself, the projects are chargeable, allowable, costable, allowed to be expensed against, having a look at the project budget, task level, having a look at transaction controls, any restrictions, and we've got to tick against all of those. We're happy that that's not restricting anything. So why is it we're not seeing projects on the list of values is the question that we still have unanswered. Okay, if you got this far, thanks and well done, and we will try and resolve this issue and follow up on it.